Parents made every single birthday about my sister for the last 8 years. I recently saw a similar story read online, and realized I just had to tell my own. This will be my one and only Reddit post. And I'm posting it because I thought telling it would help me feel a little better. I've been to some counseling, and talking about this in particular really helped. So I thought, why not just tell it online too? So, I'm 18 this year. And fairly recently on my own from my parents. I have a sister about 10 years younger than me. She was an unplanned pregnancy, and nearly didn't make it to term. I don't know many of the details of how rough my mother's second pregnancy was since I was never told much. But I do know that it was so hard on her body that my mother could no longer have kids after my sister was born. She was in and out of the hospital repeatedly that year. My mother almost didn't survive the birth either. It made her and my father latch onto my little sister because she could have potentially never been born. And ever since then, I felt like I was just the other kid in the house. Except for when they needed me as a free babysitter. The level of favoritism my parents showed long-term has me believing they were genuinely sick in the head for not noticing exactly what it was doing to me. And now it's rebounding on them, which I'll explain here. Starting with my 11th birthday, my parents wanted me to let my sister blow out my candles because she was 2 years old, and cried at the sight of a birthday cake that wasn't hers. I didn't want to do it. But my parents forced me into it. They relit the candles for me to do it again after her. But the moment felt completely ruined. The same thing happened the next year, and the year after that, and so on and so forth. They just kept forcing it until it became the norm. My sister had to have presents on my birthdays as well. I never got any on hers either. And when I asked why, they just told me that I'm a boy, and boys don't need to worry about it as much. I know I was a kid, but did they really think that was a smart thing to say? Not really. And my parents would always choose a place my sister would like to be at more than me on my own birthday. Eventually it became more like my sister was getting 2 birthdays a year, and I got none. Beyond this, my parents made their entire lives revolve around my sister. If there's something I wanted to do, my sister had to want to do it too. Otherwise it was vetoed unless I could do it alone. I learned to just lock myself in my room with my video games because they didn't seem to bother me there. Unless my sister wanted to come running in to annoy me. Hence why I put a lock on the door. My parents wanted me to remove it. But I freaked out because I was an angry teenager who was tired of being intruded on at any given time. My sister came running in more than once when I had no clothes on. And my parents were upset at me for being naked, in my own room. When I pointed out how ludicrous that was, they withdrew their objection and just let me keep the lock. My sister developed quite the princess complex because of how she was being spoiled on a daily basis. And she was very demanding. So I stayed away from her as much as I feasibly could. Whatever excuse I could use to not have to deal with her. Even if I had to make stuff up just to have time to myself. My parents hired a teen girl babysitter and I got more personal time. And then the babysitter quit because my sister wouldn't listen to her and my parents tried to keep from paying by saying she did a bad job. The girl got some other people involved and my parents finally paid her what they owed her. Then they hired another girl to babysit on the regular. And this one stayed. But my parents still made it clear that I was to be watching my sister any day I had free. Which I went out of my way to make busy at my part-time job if I could. My sister treated me as her personal butler and ordered me around. She even had a stupid nickname for me she wouldn't stop using. Just hearing that nickname makes my blood boil. And if I didn't give her everything she wanted, she'd cry and call our parents. And then I'd be in trouble for mistreating her. We had many massive arguments because of this. And after I refused to yield anymore, my relationship with my parents devolved into barely any words spoken between us for some time. And yet, during my high school graduation they had the nerve to brag to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. Well, they weren't wrong. But the reason they were thinking of was not the one that actually happened. I worked hard just biding my time for when I'd be free. But my parents acted like they'd done so much. Maybe they did before my sister was born. But afterwards it was all about her. They didn't even ask me about school until parent-teacher conferences came up. I graduated with a B and C average. And after my graduation my parents just took me to some place where my sister would always have more fun than me, even though the trip was supposed to be for me. On my 18th birthday in July though, things really boiled to the surface. Even though it was my 18th, it didn't feel like it was about me at all. I hoped to God that we were going to my favorite restaurant for once. But no, they had the party at the local knockoff Chuck E. Cheese. Which is the only place like it nearby to us. So it was the de facto celebratory destination whenever anything big was achieved. Including my high school graduation. I did say it was a place my sister would enjoy more than me. I was surrounded by kids half my age having parties. And I was so bored with nothing to do but eat mediocre pizza, and play claw machines and dated arcade games for tickets to cheaply made prizes that brought me no joy. Then when it was time for cake, my parents came out with one that was pink with white flowers on it. Sure, it had my name on it. But it was very obviously not a boy's cake, and there was only 10 candles. My parents lit the candles and set it right in front of my sister to blow out. That's when it finally happened. I just had this mental moment of all the pent-up hate mentally flashing before me, and then I just started ugly crying. I, an 18-year-old boy, was crying in front of the whole family. Everyone was so shocked that time seemed to just freeze. I got up and all of the stuff I'd been holding in for the past 8 years just spilled out like word vomit. The entire family got to be witness to this event. And when it was finally over, I just walked outside to sit by the family car. Several relatives trailed out after me to say they were sorry, and that they didn't know about the pink cake because my parents kept it covered till it was served. I said it didn't matter that they didn't know. They all sat back and watched as my life was taken over by Little Miss Sunshine for the past 8 years. I had no real birthdays or celebrations of my own. They were all about her. And then, on the biggest birthday of my life, they all expected me to just smile and nod like always while they handed my sister a cake that was entirely meant for her when it wasn't even her birthday. Some of them started giving me apologies. But they made the excuse that all this time they just thought I was okay with it because my parents said I was. I told them I was never okay with it. And my parents forced it on me every year till I just pretended to accept it. I spread my arms out and said to look where we were. Does it look like the place I wanted to celebrate my graduation and 18th birthday? No one even tried to stick up for me all this time. I'm just the other kid while my sister gets everything. I didn't even get to have any of my friends there because my parents stopped letting me invite them long ago after they tried to voice their opinions over my sister getting to blow out my candles. There are 365 days a year, and was it so bad to want one that was about me and not her? Instead I'm treated like the greedy entitled brat for wanting my own birthday. Then I just went back to ugly crying. My father came outside by that point to yell at me for making such a huge scene. Because my mother was crying too, my sister was upset because I ruined her moment, and now everybody in there who saw thinks they're bad parents. I ended up yelling at him that they are bad parents, and he should know exactly why. Well, after I said that, the rest of the family descended on him like a pack of wolves. Better late than never, I suppose. But I'd never seen anything like it before. My father was practically backed right up to the restaurant front door. And then most of the crowd flooded back inside with him to have it out with my mother too. My grandparents stayed with me, and apologized for having their eyes shut so tight for so long. I don't know what was said to my parents in the restaurant. But it was roughly a half hour before they came back out. And when they did, they looked incredibly defeated. My mother was still sniffling after crying so hard, and neither of my parents could look me in the eyes. They both awkwardly apologized for what they did. And then offered to redo the party elsewhere. But that wasn't really enough for the crowd. One of my uncles ahemed rather loudly, and my parents said they'd never make me let my sister blow out my candles again, or give her presents on my birthday, or make any part of it about her. There was another ahem. And my parents also apologized for getting a cake that was obviously not even meant for me. And that they just felt like I wasn't worried about cake anymore at my age. Oh boy, was that the wrong thing to say. I became furious all over again, and yelled at them that my age was irrelevant. They'd literally given my birthday to my sister, and had no good reason as to why, and they knew it. Then I said there was no point in redoing the party because it's too damn late. They clearly showed that I mean nothing to them. They ruined 8 years of my life till I became an adult. What future birthdays with them could I possibly look forward to? Well, my father started to get angry at me for saying that. But when the entire family yelled at him, he shut up. My grandfather told him I'm exactly right. And there is no possible way they can undo the damage done now. He said my parents were awful people, played favorites, and treated me like a black sheep ever since my sister was born. And what's more, they were all awful themselves because they just let it happen too. And I'm owed far more than an apology. I was owed my life back. My mother broke down again and tried to come closer to me while crying my name and apologizing. But I refused to let her anywhere near me. And half the family body blocked her from getting close. I just said I couldn't take this anymore and started to walk away. One of my aunts chased me down and brought me back. I could hear multiple family members yelling and cussing at my parents over what happened. But I was so upset, I couldn't even feel happy for any bit of justice after all this time. Also, where was my sister when this was all going on? She was still in the restaurant all by herself eating cake and ripping open presents that were there for me. And if anyone was wondering, yes, my parents served her some cake after I cried and walked out. You'd think doing that wouldn't be their primary focus in the moment. But they were called out on it later. My grandparents got me to calm down and sit in their old minivan while everyone else cleared out the party. My sister threw a huge tantrum after being caught opening my presents. One of which was a brand new smartphone that she threw against the wall and broke because she wasn't allowed to keep it. She literally just got a brand new phone on her own birthday a few months earlier. I ended up being so upset that I was ranting that I never wanted to celebrate my birthday again. And my grandparents let me stay the night over at their house. When I came home, I still didn't speak to my parents. My mother just kept crying because I wouldn't talk to her. And my father was as closed-mouthed as me. The following weekend my grandparents convinced me to go with them out to dinner. And when we got there, I was surprised to find a whole new party waiting for me. My parents were there, and they kept up with having the "don't hate us" smiles on their faces almost the entire time. There was a big chocolate cake with 18 candles on it. And there was even a banner with my name. They called it my happy belated birthday graduation party because I didn't really get either this year. I did kind of have to pretend to be happy. One good party doesn't undo 8 years of favoritism. Or even make a dent in it really. And where was my sister? She was sitting at the table with her arms folded and her lip curled because it wasn't all about her like it used to be. And rather than sing happy birthday for me, they just sang an altered version called Happy Day. Then as soon as I blew out the candles, my sister screamed. I mean an ear-bleedingly loud little girl scream. My parents had to rush her out, and then bring her back in later looking more upset than ever. She quietly pouted in her seat for the rest of the party. I did still get a new smartphone as well. And my sister got hers taken away, among other things for what she did at the prior party. But the smartphone wasn't all. The whole family had chipped in and gotten me a car. It was just an old white Volvo. But I loved it the moment I laid eyes on it. My grandfather knows a thing or two about cars and fixed it up himself. I was so happy. But my sister clearly was not, because she let out another one of those screams. She started having a massive tantrum and demanding a car too. My mother had to take her into the bathroom and they didn't come back out for a while. My father just went back to looking defeated. My sister had effectively ruined their attempt at trying to look good in front of the whole family. Multiple family members also had strong words for my parents that my sister was acting that way because they raised her to be a princess spoiled brat. I obviously started driving the car around right away. But only days later my sister actually vandalized the car by taking a hammer and breaking 2 of the side windows and cracking the windshield to the point the car was undrivable. My parents managed to stop her before she did any more damage. But she screamed bloody murder when they grabbed her and took the hammer away, then tried to bite them. Oh, everyone was furious with my sister. Especially my grandparents, because my grandfather had put so much work into that car, and my sister ruined it while having a massive tantrum. My grandparents had spoiled my sister so badly that she couldn't mentally comprehend that I could have something she couldn't. And several other family members laid into my parents about how they were setting my sister up for failure by making her an entitled brat that expects the world to be given to her. And she's going to have a terrible adult life because they won't put their feet down and teach her some respect. Well, her actions didn't go unpunished. My sister was grounded for the rest of the summer, and effective of the new school year was sent to boarding school. My mother cried like a baby about it too. But my father had to be adamant that it was the only way to start undoing the damage they'd done. Yes, they fully acknowledge they are at fault. It was kinda hard for them not to since no one sided with them at all. My sister is absolutely miserable at that school. She hates the clothes, she hates the rules, and she's been lying almost constantly. But with cameras almost everywhere now, she's not getting away with any of it. Our parents tried to visit her a few times, but she just screamed at them for putting her in that place. From what I hear, this may be her school life till she's 18 years old. My parents did pay to fix my car. They had an auto glass company replace the windows and windshield, and it looks just as it did before. In August my grandfather came to me and said if I was interested, he found me a job working for a friend. But it was 40 miles away. So I'd need to move out of my parents' house unless I wanted that commute. I was all for moving. Finding a first apartment wasn't so easy though. I had to get approved for a credit card just to get accepted for a studio. But I got it. And I have been living where I am now since September. My parents keep trying to contact me. But I rarely speak to them. Anytime we do speak, I just feel awkward and uncomfortable. My grandfather has suggested that they simply don't want to acknowledge how badly they failed as parents, and trying to get me to forgive them will make them feel better about themselves, or something like that. But I'm not going to forgive. Not anytime soon. I'm finally happy and away from them. Now they've got nothing. They don't have me, and they don't have my sister. And my parents had to take more hours at work because boarding school for my sister is not cheap. Nor can I imagine was the party they had to throw for me, or the repairs to my car. Empty house, angry relatives, and the only thing they have left is their work. Feels like incredible misery to me. And I don't take delight in it. But it is the result of their own actions after all. Entitled Uncle wants a close-to-free photoshoot for sister's baby shower. I am an amateur photographer that photographs events for couple $100, since I am still a student. One of my friends suggested a person who was looking for a photographer for his sister's baby shower in Austin, Texas, which is like 4.5 hours away. I live in Dallas, Texas. I contacted this guy, let's call him Jack, asking if he was still looking for a photographer. He said yes and asked me for a quote. I said I usually charge $100 an hour for a 20 to 25 pics per hour along with edits and 50 photo printed album, but since it is a 6-hour event, with several dance performances, skits and games, a 9 hours drive to and fro, plus accommodation since it will be pretty late to drive back, and the fact that he needs a videographer along with me as the photographer, as he doesn't want me to go back and forth, that means a total of 2 people have to share the cost they pay us. I asked for $150 per hour. So a total of $900, for all of the above-mentioned things, including the editing hours. It's $900. He asked me if I was a professional photographer. I told him not exactly, but I have been doing this for 6+ years and I am pretty good at editing pics. I sent him my portfolio of both raw and edited pics, which takes a minimum of 2 hours per 10 pics since I am not super fluent at Photoshop. Jack said he will call me back in few hours and hung up. Cut to few hours later. Jack called me and said he really loves my portfolio but he can't pay more than $500 and that even $500 is too much, as photography is easy and anybody with a smartphone can be a good photographer. I clarified saying I will be taking pics with my camera and not a smartphone, and what I am asking is not too much considering he is getting 2 people for 6 hours for the price of 1, not to mention the other factors included. At this point, Jack started arguing that he is doing me a favor by even considering $500 since this would bring me exposure and I am not even a professional photographer. I told him if it were a local event I'd love to do it for $75 per hour. He said it is local since it's within state lines and it's just a mere 4 hours drive. He also said there are professional photographers charging only $200 total for a 6 hours event. I told him to give me some time to see if I could reduce the price by cutting my any cost. I tried to negotiate with him and told him I will do it for $500 as I am in college and I really need some extra money. He refused and said that I should understand that he's trying to gift his sister with eternal memories, and that I should do it for free as I didn't take up the offer before. 20 minutes had passed by the way. When I told him I can't do that, he called me an asshole and said my pics weren't even that good. Cut to 2 days later, he called me again and said that he is willing to pay me $200 for a 6-hour event as that's what professionals charge in the city of Austin. I told him no, because my friend wants to cancel as he's not getting paid enough to take a video and waste an entire weekend for absolutely no money. He got pissed, called me names and hung up the phone and blocked me. My entitled and now psychopathic father and his even more deranged wife, my stepmother, demand to know where I live now I've moved out from home. As the title suggests, my mom and dad are divorced, since I was 4 and my sister was 6 and we are 18 and 20 now. It was simply the way life was, split Christmas and alternating weekends. Over time, me and to a lesser extent my sister wanted to spend less and less time with our dad and his new girlfriend, the woman my father had a year-long affair with when I was 3 that ultimately led to the divorce. It got to the point that the little time we would spend with our dad I hated more and more. We would often fight and would be ended by my dad and his girlfriend ganging up on me and saying it's 2 against 1. You'll lose. Bearing in mind I was between 7 and 10 when this was a thing. When I was around 10, I may have been as old as 11, I refused to go. I simply would not leave the house to go to my dad, so I remained, and my sister, as old as 13, went still. Apparently they told my mom via text that she had raised a nasty little fat, ugly retarded shit. The retarded part was because of a recent autism diagnosis, that my dad had decided was entirely mine and my mom's fault. Fast forward about 2 years and we are now at a point where me and my sister no longer spend the night at my dad's since I refused to go consistently and freaked my sister out by telling everyone I was going to take my pocket money and buying a train ticket home. This is all in the confines of London, so trains everywhere 24/7 pretty much, but also not the safest at night, especially for a 12-year-old alone. So my mum fought with my dad over this and we never spent nights again, at the genuine risk that I would run away that my dad's side refused to acknowledge, but he agreed following some comments targeted at me over text. Since I now had a phone he could say them to me personally, once again calling me fat, short, ugly and retarded among other things such as infantile. I was 12, and a genuine disappointment of a child. By this point I wanted not to go to my dad's at all, and I would not have were it not mandated by the divorce agreements that my dad would not yield any further until I personally decided at 14, about 18 months from this point. There are plenty more stories and behaviors regarding my dad and his new wife that aren't relevant to this, but I am happy to talk about more depending on how much interest this gets. But the situation referenced in the title is regarding my move to university accommodation from my home with my mother. For some extra context, I had scarcely spoken to my father's side of the family whatsoever apart from when I was required to visit, and my dad's right-wing extremist parents would visit too as such a wonderful surprise. I have not visited since 2017 and contact engaged by me has been almost nothing, entirely my choice to not visit, but I did have to maintain some kind of communication with him till I was 18 and he no longer paid any money to my mum to fund me. Once I turned 18 it was lights out for the relationship. My dad and stepmom blocked on everything and numbers deleted. 6 months later, my dad was made aware accidentally by my sister that I was moving away, but I did not allow her to say where. All possible avenues of communication have been exhausted by him, including hijacking my chess.com account from years ago, which he remembered the login for and added himself as a friend on my account to message me to try to find out where I live, including hanging around my mum's house and most recently harassing my sister too, messaging and turning up to her own university halls to get it out of her. She still reluctantly refused. He has since threatened members of my mum's extended family on Facebook to find out where I am, claiming he has a right to know where I am, and I feel so guilty and responsible. I want nothing more than to be free of the pair of them. The stepmother is worse by a large margin. My sister has elected to keep up a relationship with the pair of them, and that's her choice. She was always the favorite of theirs, or at least not called slurs by them. I can't help but sometimes feel I'm in the wrong for refusing to make amends and spend the time with him he believes he has the right to.